Titanic. We all know this name. We watched its movies. We saw it sinking over and over again. The story told to us is simple. It hit an iceberg and sank. But the truth is much darker than that. Because what sent the Titanic to the bottom of the ocean was not a single piece of ice. It was a chain of mistakes that no one wanted to see. In this video, we go behind the scenes of the question, why did the Titanic sink? And what I will tell you will not be the same as what you have watched until now. Lost facts. In April 1912, Titanic, one of the greatest engineering projects in human history, was buried at the bottom of the ocean on its very first voyage and became the grave of 1,496 people on its maiden journey. Was this an accident or the inevitable result of a chain of errors? Today, it is not possible to give a single answer to the question of why Titanic sank. Because what sank Titanic was human error, corporate pressure, ignored warnings, and the overconfidence in technology. Titanic was built by the White Star Line Company. It was promoted as an unsinkable ship. In fact, technically no one said it will never sink in official documents. However, the company's advertising language in the newspapers of the period deliberately created this perception. People were made to feel that this ship was safe, even almost an engineering marvel close to the power of God. This psychology created an atmosphere that underestimated the danger from the very beginning of the voyage. In 1912, the Titanic was not only the largest passenger ship produced up to that time, but also had a length of 269 meters, 4,632 gross tons of tonnage, and a capacity of 3,547 passengers. Three critical mistakes that caused the sinking of the Titanic were made during the production stage. The first of these was that the ship's permanent watertight compartment divisions were compromised, and the bulkheads separating different decks were built only 3 meters high due to cuts made to create more space and for special designs such as the grand staircase. This mistake caused the ship to take on water much faster than it should have. The second was that although it had the capacity to carry 64 lifeboats, which meant saving 4,500 people, the number of lifeboats was reduced to 16 because it was thought that they would create a crowded and ugly appearance on the deck. This meant a capacity of 1,178 people. The third mistake was that during the ship's construction, in the period when steel had just begun to be widely used in 1912, iron should have been used in the rivet machines, but steel was used instead. This proved insufficient in blocking ice fragments, and with a chain of errors, this massive ship was put into service. When the night of April 14th, 1912 arrived, the Titanic was advancing in the North Atlantic. The weather was extremely cold. The sea was calm. This calmness made it difficult to see icebergs. Normally, the foam formed when waves hit an iceberg could be noticed, but that night the sea was like glass. This made the lookouts' job even more difficult. Moreover, the lookouts did not have binoculars. The binoculars had not been taken aboard the ship due to confusion at the port. This neglect, which seemed like a small detail, prevented them from noticing the iceberg from several kilometers away. Throughout the voyage, Titanic had received iceberg warnings many times. However, some of these warnings were not fully conveyed to the captain or were not taken seriously. Behind this was corporate pressure. The purpose of Titanic was not only to carry passengers, it was also to gain prestige by offering a fast and comfortable journey. Captain Edward Smith was making this voyage shortly before his retirement, and it was expected that Titanic would reach New York strongly. Slowing down meant a loss of prestige in the eyes of the company. Advancing at 41 kilometers per hour, which was only 3.7 kilometers less than its maximum speed, in an ocean full of icebergs on a pitch-dark night became the beginning of the end for Titanic. As the hours approached midnight and the ship was traveling at this speed, the lookouts finally noticed the iceberg. But now it was too late. The lookout immediately grabbed the phone and said those three famous words, "Iceberg right ahead." Captain William, within just 37 seconds, alarms were sounded, the engines were stopped, and reversing was initiated. This was a routine maneuver to slowly turn the ship, but it was the wrong decision. At least 800 meters were needed to stop the ship, but the iceberg was only 274 meters away. The Titanic slowly began to slide to the left. This turn did not help. The Titanic struck the massive ice at an angle. At first glance, this seemed like an advantage. However, the iceberg opened a long gash in the ship's hull. The submerged part of the iceberg tore through the steel rivets and opened square-shaped breaches across 5 compartments, and 7 tons of water began to flood into the ship. The water spread from one compartment to another, rapidly weighing down the front of the ship. The engineers quickly realized the seriousness of the situation. According to calculations, the ship could have stayed afloat if at most 2 or 3 compartments had taken on water. But 6 compartments were flooding at once. This meant that the ship would sink mathematically. In other words, at that moment, there was no chance of saving the Titanic. This information was known by the ship's management. However, it was not immediately told to the passengers. To prevent panic, the truth was shared gradually. The lifeboats could not be lowered even at full capacity. Due to panic, lack of training, and poor organization, many boats were launched half-empty. The third-class passengers were delayed in reaching the deck. They were left in the water without even fully understanding what was happening. The Titanic was not just a ship disaster. It was also a tragedy that starkly revealed the class divisions of the era. If we return to the question of why the Titanic sank, the iceberg alone was not the sole cause. There were design flaws. Ice warnings were not taken seriously enough. The speed was not reduced. The lookout's equipment was insufficient. The lifeboats were inadequate. The evacuation process was poorly managed. This was a chain of negligence. Each one alone might not have caused a disaster, but when they all came together, they sent the world's largest ship to the bottom of the ocean within a few hours. After the Titanic sank, the survivors faced the danger of freezing. The water temperature was near zero. A human could not survive in this water for more than a few minutes. The distress calls were noticed too late. The nearest ship, the Californian, had shut down its wireless operator early. The distress signals were not received in time. By the time the ship named Carpathia arrived, thousands of people had already died in the water. The total number of passengers and crew was 2,208. 712 people survived. 1,496 people died. As a result, the Titanic became the symbol of the unsinkable ship, humanity's blind trust in technology and institutional negligence. When we look at the wreck of the Titanic today, what lies at the bottom of the ocean is not just a ship. It is the price of arrogance, negligence, and the mindset of nothing will happen to us. This disaster fundamentally changed maritime regulations. From then on, having a sufficient number of lifeboats on every ship became mandatory. Wireless watch was made mandatory 24 hours a day. Iceberg observation systems were improved, so the Titanic sank. But with its cost, rules were born that would save the lives of thousands of people. Perhaps the most painful truth is this: the Titanic did not have to sink. This was not the work of nature, but of a chain of human errors. The Titanic was not just a ship, it was the symbol of humanity's blind trust in technology. It showed that something called unsinkable could be buried at the bottom of the ocean within a few hours. When we look at the wreck of the Titanic today, what lies there is not only metal. A person makes their greatest mistake at the moment they believe they are invincible. Those who survived in the freezing water that night, those who waited for hours in lifeboats, those who lost their loved ones before their eyes. If you would like to listen in the next video to what the survivors experienced that night and how they survived, let us know in the comments. Perhaps the true face of the Titanic is hidden most in the stories of those who survived. Subscribe.